In a world so ravaged and torn by a myriad of doomsdays, it's quite easy for the little things to escape a lone survivor wandering the wastes and wonders of what once was. The entire Stories of Navezgane series focuses almost exclusively on those tiny details. The placement of some gore, the existence of some loot, the door behind another door, and the color of the background of a painting. After discussing all of these things and so much more, I come to you today both astounded and embarrassed to admit I missed something big. Okay, to be fair, it's actually an incredibly small detail, but the implications of its existence are massive, and it's quite literally flown across my screen several times. I am, of course, talking about the American flag, the good old stars and stripes, as it appears here in-game at the Red Mesa military base. I'm gonna let this sit here for a moment. Go ahead, take it in, and you tell me what strikes you as odd. Give up? Perhaps not. Maybe you've already spotted it. If you haven't, I won't bury the lead any longer. There are 81 stars on this flag. Thanks to commenter Orc Lord and their self-professed OCD superpowers, I've learned of this wild detail, and oh boy, does it lend itself to so many questions. Why are there 81 stars? What do the extra 31 represent? Or rather, where do they represent? Based on our previous findings in this series, the in-game date should match pretty closely with ours in real life. So did the United States add 31 stars in a matter of years as Navezgane's history departs from our own? Or does the timeline diverge far sooner than we'd ever expected? Does this have something to do with World War III? Let's explore these questions together as we take a closer look at the American flag. To begin our attempt at answering these questions, first we're going to have to go over a brief history of the Star-Spangled Banner. I know, you didn't sign up for a history lesson, so I'll try and channel some inner CGP Grey and keep this as brief and entertaining as possible, because it's important to know this for what comes after. The United States flag has been modified 26 times since its inception in 1777. Technically, the first flag was first seen in 1775, flown aboard Continental Navy Captain Essex Hopkins's ship Alfred in the Delaware River. The flag loosely resembled Old Glory, but with a Union Jack in the upper left-hand corner rather than the white stars on blue. It was on June 14th of 1777 that the Second Continental Congress passed the flag resolution, which gave us our first flag with 13 red and white stripes and 13 stars on a blue background. Well, sort of. The resolution passed really just established that the aforementioned specifications be the standard. It didn't actually choose any one design to be the design for the American flag. In fact, it didn't even specify how many of the 13 stripes should be red or white, only that they be alternating, nor did it specify if those stripes should be vertical or horizontal. Woof. To save us all some time, the early history of the flag in the late 18th century gets pretty muddy. But in 1795, the number of stars and stripes on the flag was increased from 13 to 15 to represent the new statehoods of Vermont and Kentucky. Then, in 1818, the flag was made to have 13 stripes again in order to honor the original 13 colonies, but now 20 stars, with a plan to add a new star officially on the 4th of July. Each year a new state was added to the Union. This went on until 1912 when the 48-star flag was adopted. Funny enough, this was the first time it was actually specified in what arrangement the star should be in. Before this, we had all kinds of patterns. Finally, in 1959, we had a short-lived 49-star flag with the addition of Alaska to the Union, and in 1960, the presently familiar 50-star flag was born with the addition of Hawaii. Oh, I don't know how he does that so cleanly. Oh my god. Okay, moving on. Now, I know what you're thinking. How the hell was all of that relevant? Well, let's return to the flag as we see it in 7 Days to Die. 13 stripes, horizontally, 7 red and 6 white. This hasn't changed. But 81 stars in a slightly offset 9x9 pattern. Historically, we now know the only reason more stars have ever been added to the flag was for the addition of a new state to the Union. Thus, the United States must have been composed of 81 states when the world, for most intents and purposes, ended. So how and why did the United States add 31 new states to its Union? Well, historically speaking, once again, in order for a place to become a member of the United States, first consent must be given. Next, it must petition the United States for statehood. This is decided by the US Congress, and then the US President must sign the deal to make it official. Using Puerto Rico as a real-world example, we know that not only is this a much more complex topic, it would also theoretically take a significant amount of time and convincing to make happen, as the ramifications of adding another state to the Union are immense for all political parties, the nation's economy, and so much more. That being said, it's happened plenty of times before. What really befuddles me about it, though, is just how quickly these states would have been added. Based on how rapid the spread of the zombie disease was and how short-lived World War III likely was, I'd wager Old Glory went from 50 to 81 stars in a matter of several years. But how could that have happened? One word: Mexico. Because our friends to the north are far too polite for the United States to ever invade, again, the next nearest country to yoink territory from would be to the immediate south. Why the United States would invade Mexico in a time of war that likely pitted it against enemies far further across the oceans is beyond me. So perhaps it was less of an invasion and more of an assimilation. The great nation of Mexico isn't exactly known for its cohesion and prosperity, so it's not entirely impossible for the US to take it under its wing in such a drastic situation. But why am I so sure it would have to be Mexico? Isn't it a bit more likely for some European friends to join the party? Maybe, but that would get really complicated with the European Union and being across the pond and all that. And there are 44 countries in Europe, it would just be too messy. But, as it turns out, Mexico has 32 states. At least, that's the short story. You see, technically, Mexico has 32 federal entities that would often be referred to as states or provinces depending on which country you're looking at. Mexico City, being the capital of Mexico, is one of those federal entities and is often referred to as the 32nd state. But if the entirety of Mexico were to join the United States of America, it's extremely unlikely that Washington, D.C. would be replaced by Mexico City. No longer being the capital, Mexico City would likely legally join one of the states it borders, bringing the total number of states added to the United States to 31, for our total of 81 stars on the flag. So, with what we figured out, let's wrap this interesting detail up with a tidy bow. In the 7 Days to Die universe, the combination of a rapidly spreading zombie disease and a third world war sent the entire globe into a drastic state of panic and chaos. With troops being deployed around the world to contain all kinds of threats, fingers being pointed, economies bustling and crumbling under the weight of wartime production, maps were changing too fast to keep up with as deals were made and legislation rapidly passed in order for those countries who could not cope with this harsh new reality to simply keep their peoples alive. Amid this chaos, somehow, Mexico found itself holding a vote to petition the United States to join the Union. Whether for land, or resources, or human capital, the United States accepted all 31 states of Mexico into the Union, likely with blinding speed. This, likely, caused even more chaos and turmoil as two longtime neighbors abruptly became one. The new union held up long enough for the flags to be made and distributed at the very least, but one way or another, the might of the United States wasn't enough. Likely, nothing would have been for the zombie hordes and devastating bombs that razed the world over. A new chapter in the history books was written, but nothing lasted long enough for the books to be printed. Now, all the evidence we have to suggest that the aforementioned unification took place is a flag. An extremely recognizable one, changed just subtly enough for most of us to not even notice. But for those who do notice, we can ponder and hypothesize, but like all things in this series, we may never get a concrete answer. Perhaps we will in a future update, but I have a feeling that's a long ways away. So until then, and until next time, thanks for watching.